Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about grants and fundraising and donations, so gratuitous income. Okay, eventually we're going to be talking about that. There we go. So when we think about fundraising, we can think of several different approaches. One way is to simply use volunteers who can fundraise on their own, but they also can reduce your expenses. So in a sense, it's not really fundraising, but it is often reducing your expenses. We can also think about gratuitous. So this is, again, outright gifts, including annual campaigns, bricks. We see, bricks here. Checkoffs is basically like on a United Way campaign or some other source of funding. They're just going to check your organization, say they want to give you money. Cause-related marketing would be like Pepsi saying, for every sale, we're going to give you 25 cents. So this is primarily what we're going to talk about, and grants. And in the next video, we'll talk about collaborations and partnerships. So a quick note about volunteers. So often we just say, we need volunteers, and we don't really think about what that process is. So here are just a couple key points to think about when using volunteers. I'm sorry. Number one, do they fit with your mission? Number two, have job descriptions for volunteers. Volunteers need to know what they're doing, and you need to know what you need volunteers for. Too often organizations just have people show up without any clue what they're doing, and then they get frustrated and don't come back, and you don't maximize them. Three, recruit. You can never have too many volunteers. Just make sure, again, you have actual jobs for them to do. Select and place volunteers in a place that's appropriate for their skill set. Orient them to your organization, make sure they know what's going on. And yes, supervise and evaluate them. You can fire volunteers. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it can be done. And then finally, recognize them and celebrate them. In this picture here, we've got some volunteers running a youth tennis program in a parking lot. Grants, which is going to be a big focus of the discussion. So first of all, why do we want grants? Well, there's some obvious reasons. There's a competitive budget environment. It is more difficult to get people to just give you money than ever before. Grants also could allow you to extend your programs and services that you might not otherwise have without a grant. Now, a grant is slightly different than a donation. A donation is given without expectation of any return, where a grant has an expectation that you're going to do something very specific with that money. Oftentimes you'll have follow-up reports for the grants, so it's a little more detail. So who gives grants? Primarily two general types of organizations. First, government agencies do give grants. More grants come from foundations, and this is a form of a nonprofit, but instead of this organization, this foundation, doing the work, they're actually collecting money and then distributing it out to different organizations. We can talk about three different types of foundations. One is an independent or private foundation. This is, as it says, an individual or family or group of individuals have generally made their money somewhere and found a foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates, the Gates Foundation being the most common one. Corporate are tied specifically to a corporation, Fannie Mae, Ben & Jerry's. Whereas like the Gates Foundation, yes, he made his money in Microsoft, like that still is private money. Corporate money is being solicited and with some management directly from the corporation. And then finally we have community foundations. These are small foundations dedicated solely to projects within a local neighborhood, city, county, community. Now, how do you find a grant? And we can just kind of talk through a basic general process. So the first thing I say is do what you do. You have a certain mission, you have a vision, you have goals and objectives. You have those for a reason. Stick to those. Don't just go looking for a grant and then try to match a program to a grant. Do what you do to start with. Then identify your funding strategies and needs. How are you getting your income? Are you getting some earned income? Are you getting investment income? And then figure out where the gap is. And where you have a gap, you can start looking for grants. Then it's a matter of discovering granting agencies. And the easiest way to do that, quite frankly, is Google. There are databases out there, and the university pays for some of those that you can access. But in today's web age, Google is pretty much the easiest, simplest way to do that. And you're going to look for things about the granting organization, like how much on average they give, what's the time period, what's the dollar value, is there an area of focus, are they focused on childhood obesity or on arts? Because foundations are going to have a certain interest. And then are there restrictions? Is it just in Salt Lake City? Is it just in Utah? Is it just for youth organizations? Those types of issues. Here's my amusing little how you find grants on Google cartoon. So you can read that. Okay. Once you've identified various possible granting agencies, you're going to select one or two or three or four. You're going to make contact with them. Personal contact is always better if you can make a phone call and establish a relationship, particularly with the bigger agencies. In today's online world, that information is often obscured, so you may have to go through electronic sources to make contact, but grants are often very relationship based. It's important to build those relationships. You're going to secure the guidelines. This is basically what's the process, what's the restrictions, and then you're going to apply for the grant. Okay. So some examples of grant application processes, and if you choose to do the grant assignment, you'll do something similar for this. So here's a grant application process, and it tells you again eligibility. You must provide tennis programs for this grant for underserved youth ages 5 to 18 with an educational component, or provide tennis programs for people with disabilities of all ages with a life skills component. So if you're providing basketball programs, this is not for you. If you're providing tennis programs for adults, this is not for you. If you're providing tennis programs that do not have an educational component, this is not for you. You must be a USTA, United States Tennis Association organization member. That's who's giving this grant. You must be a 501c3, not-for-profit. Keep in mind there are various types of nonprofits, 501c4, 501c7, could also be doing this type of programming, but you must be a 501c3 for this grant. And then if you're wondering what an educational component specifically means, it lays it out to you. Then it tells you what they do not fund, not staff salaries, not capital projects, not building or resurfacing our courts, and then there's the deadlines. Okay. Here's what they ask for, contact information, and then a narrative. No longer than 5 pages. This is fairly common for a small grant. You're going to tell what the project is, and this is key here, this evaluation component. More and more grants are asking for this. They want to know that their money is working, or how are they going to know that their money is working? So you're going to need to lay out an evaluation plan. What measures are you going to report? How are you going to determine that that money is meeting its goal? So if you're in an after-school program to reduce childhood obesity, how are you going to measure that? And you'll have to report that back. Then program sustainability. Okay, this means how are you going to keep the program going financially? They're not going to fund you every year, most likely. So this grant is used to help you, but they want to know that the program will keep going even after they fund you. Then basic financial information and some supporting documentation. So that's grants in a quick nutshell. The next thing we talk about is just charitable giving. This is donations in this case. So who do people give to? You can think about that. They give to nonprofit organizations. They give to organizations they've been involved in. They give to arts organizations, recreation organizations. And then from there, we can think about why people give. And I'm going to propose several reasons. You could think of these on your own. One, it fulfills social, religious, or philosophical convictions. So, for example, if you have certain religious beliefs, if you go to church, you may give back to that church. It's part of your religious conviction. Number 2 is a tax advantage. Donations to 501c3 are tax deductible, so people may want that tax advantage. 3, gratitude for a service. Say you grew up in a Boys and Girls Club and now you want to give back to help others. And number 4, which is also key, gain appreciation and recognition. People like to be noticed. They like to be recognized. And if this is a motivation for your donors, you want to make sure you're doing that. Maybe that's a brick campaign. Maybe that's their name on a website. However it is, we care about these things because it helps us devise strategies for people to give us money. Again, if they want to gain appreciation and recognition, they want to make clear we do that. If they're about it for the tax status, tax advantage, then we're going to send out our fundraising in tax season in December, right before the fiscal year end. We're going to make sure that they know that it's all over our website that donations to us are tax deductible. I'm going to skip these. So, a couple different strategies for fundraising. One is an annual campaign. This is an organized process that raises a specific amount of money over a specific time. If you listen to NPR, you're very well aware of an annual campaign. Every twice a year, I believe, for NPR, public radio, they're interrupting their program saying, hey, we need money, we're raising money. The same thing if you watch PBS, public television. These are annual campaigns. Special events are things like a 5K, a polar bear plunge, something that people do, a big event that you pay money to participate in. It could be a dinner, all kinds of things. Planned giving is more for your wealthy donors. This is basically them laying out a plan that they're going to give money a certain amount every year or sometimes after they pass. Supported organizations we'll talk about in detail in a later slide. So annual campaigns, and I mentioned NPR, Red Cross also does this. Some pros of that is it's predictable. You know what it is every year. You generally have a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to raise. It also tends to generate a large number of donations. Cons, it has a short-term benefit. Excuse me. And then the money is often unrestricted. That can be a pro as well, actually, that you can use the money how you want. Support organizations. So these are friends of organizations, we often call these. These are nonprofits that are created to support the work of specific government programs and places. So if we talk about a library or a government-funded zoo or a park, government isn't tax deductible. The government collects taxes. People may be reluctant to give to the government. The government's not really in the business of fundraising. So these are organizations that spring up to support government programs they love to help with that fundraising component. Almost every library has a Friends of the Library, and they'll do book sales and stuff to raise money. So pros of this is the support organizations have easier access to grants and donations. Cons, the support organization you're friends of may feel like they have an influence over what the government organization does. And also you've got to maintain that relationship. These are folks who are doing it as a nonprofit, not as necessarily their career. So you've got to do some maintenance on your side. Planned giving, again, this is your major donors. Obviously, this is the pro is it's an ongoing source of income. It's predictable, and it's often larger grants. The cons is just takes a lot of time and effort. Oftentimes, if you're getting planned givers, then you generally have a full-time person navigating your fundraising efforts. Excuse me, special events. So we can kind of imagine things like this, the 5K, Relay for Life, Polar Bear Plunge. Pros is not only does it raise money, but it also brings awareness about your organization, your cause. So even if you're not raising a ton of money, you're getting publicity and you're bringing awareness, often associating your organization with something fun. Cons is it's often a small margin. These have a lot of cost involved in producing them, as well as income. So you risk not raising a lot of money. So how do you decide what fundraising strategy to use? Well, here's some just tips for you. Does it fit with your mission and vision? If you were fighting childhood obesity, doing a hot dog eating contest is probably not a special event that fits with your mission. Is it cost effective? If you're a small nonprofit trying to run a 5K for 60,000 people, probably not cost effective. Will your target constituents respond? Is it something they care about? Are your donors going to care about a polar bear plunge? If your donors are senior citizens, if that's your Friends of the Library constituents, they probably don't want to do a polar bear plunge. They probably don't want to jump into freezing cold water. Do you have the organizational skill and resources to do it? That goes back to the kind of cost effectiveness. Don't run a large event if you don't have the ability to do it. Does the strategy represent a stable source of income? Or is it who knows how much money it's going to bring in? And then are there other benefits that accrue from this strategy? We talked about those with special events, that it actually also brings awareness to your organization. It's a form of marketing as well. So that covers us on grants and donations. On the next video, we'll be discussing sponsorships and partnerships.